All right, everyone. Theresa May survived the vote of no confidence, which means that she's not planning to run again for Prime Minister, which is 2021, their next general election. So she'll be sticking around for some time like a thorn in your foot that gets covered over and then works its way to the surface again 2 years later for unknown reasons and is all fucked up. Theresa May is exactly like a hideous splinter, too. But let me point something out. The no confidence vote aside, who fucking cares? Theresa May being in politics in the UK, terrible. Your Prime Minister is an embarrassment. Is that really the only problem within British politics today? Can you not think of a laundry list of other kooks within Parliament there and within politics in general? At every possible level? Like, what's his name there? Corbyn or whatever it is. Red Ed, whatever. You've got all sorts of people who are basically like commies in your political sphere. You've got inept so-called conservatives that from over here don't look very conservative at all. You've got, Theresa May, the problem about her, she's not a Brexiteer. She doesn't even support Brexit. I'm thinking that her role is predominantly she's trying to make it as painful as possible so people will eventually keel over and beg for a second referendum and say, no, please let us go back into the EU. But now they're saying, I guess the EU's courts ruled, they can reverse the triggering of their articles and ask to remain in. Yeah, they can do that. The government can do that unilaterally. It's not a problem. At this point, I have to hazard a guess some of the other countries are run by governments that would refuse to cooperate and refuse to let them back in. Then Britain remains in limbo forever, probably has a hard Brexit, and then the goal again of people like Theresa May is to make it so painful. Collapse the economy, fuck up the pensions, fuck up the military, fuck their own country up so that people will then hold another referendum to ask to re-enter the European Union. I can almost guarantee that that's the end goal that they want. If you had competent, sane leadership, they would have started off negotiations saying, look, we've got a timeline and there are certain things we won't concede. If you don't like that, we'll have a hard Brexit, we'll see what happens, and then we'll negotiate later. So you can deal with us in a fair and square manner, or we won't deal with you at all. That should have been done. Instead, Theresa May went in saying, okay, I'll give you this, and this. Can I please have this? No? Oh, okay. Can I have that? No? Oh, yeah. That's basically how she went. And Trump laughed about this at the time. He thought it was funny. He's like, wow, I could have given her tips on negotiating this. This is crazy. You're basically going into a den of wolves with a stake around your neck when you're trying to go negotiate in that manner. Theresa May's nuts. But she's not the only nut over there. Is there anyone over there that you really think would be qualified to handle the Brexit negotiations? Now that they've broken down to such a level that they have, who is going to be able to extract any concessions from the EU? But now you've got Theresa May still aboard. You're going to have to deal with the fact that she is now the person perpetually who's going to be doing this. But the thing is, some of the parts of these agreements that they're reaching are like, we can wait on this aspect till 2022. Maybe in 2030 we can decide. And it's like, okay, that's not a reasonable timeline at that point. Ed Miliband. You should have Ed Millipede should be doing it. That would be funny. Yeah, any of these people. Get Piers Morgan back here. We don't want him over here anymore because he's an embarrassment to us now. You take Piers Morgan back and make him the main Brexit negotiator. He'll fart into a microphone for several minutes and that'll be his negotiation. Or you can have, what is his name, David Cameron or whatever do it. Because he'd be about the same. He's been holding his farts since the 80s, so, it'd be quite a blast. Theresa May is not the worst within British politics. It's just like here. We've got some embarrassing people within U.S. politics. People fixate on one person, say, well, this person's off their rocker, they're hideously insane. They don't know what they're doing. They're inept. And then they won't look around and realize, they're not the only problem within government. People have a limited focus that they can give, and so they focus on one or two people or a party. It's like the Republicans are terrible. Yeah, the Democrats are terrible too. And you try to point this out to them, they act like you don't know what you're talking about, like you have two heads or something. They look at you funny. They look at you the way a raccoon looks at a rotting banana peel. It'd be really funny. These people don't know what they're talking about, nor do most people in government. Another problem and this isn't just Britain or the U.S., I think it's pretty much everywhere in the world. People assume that because a person has been elected that makes them magically smarter or magically better. It's strategy. Maybe if they are like a former military general or something, they might have a strategic mind. Some of these people, what background do they come from? Career academic, maybe a business person. That doesn't necessarily mean they know anything about strategy. They know how to bilk people out of money. They know how to brand things. They know how to give at a meeting, they know how to give a 10-minute speech impromptu without a script. Wonderful, that's wonderful. You don't need a teleprompter to speak. You're already better than 90% of DC and probably 90% of Brussels or the Parliament of the UK too. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have the ability to go to the EU and extract any concessions. And I think it's funny when people in the UK are like, well, if only someone else was handling these negotiations, this wouldn't have happened. The EU always wanted to make this painful. And they had to walk that tightrope. And I mentioned this, years ago when Brexit was triggered. The EU had a fundamental choice. They could try to be sane, but then other countries might... If the UK's economy does fine, and there's no turmoil and things seem peachy keen, other states that are leaning towards skepticism towards the EU might vote to leave. If, on the other hand, they do the opposite, really hardball the UK, which is what they chose to do, they may alienate other states. They've begun to alienate certain Eastern European groups especially, I think. So you've got movements all around Europe rising up that are more Eurosceptic, both from the left and the right. I think the Vox movement that just won in Spain, aren't they a Eurosceptic movement too? And they're, on the right. But then you've got Le Pen, and she's arguably on the left in many ways. Also a Eurosceptic movement. They got 35% of the vote in France. It'll be more next time now that Macron has fallen out of favor and his people are crashing and burning. Yeah, his party is really going to carry the next election. I'm sure. No, it'll probably be Front National or whatever they changed their name to recently that carries it. In the UK, what you should do is you should have someone like Nigel Farage negotiating the Brexit deal. Because that'd be funny, because then you could send him back into the same chambers he spent years in before, and he always got laughed at, and then, on the day of, after Brexit, it was really funny. He shows up with a great big grin on his face, and then, gives his speech, basically antagonizes everyone, and it was very, very funny. That's about all. Peace out.